Life is no problem. Life is good. I mean, I feel very lucky and blessed in a way because um, I get to wake up every day and just kind of decide if I want to get to work. And usually I get to work every day on songs. And sometimes life is very easy, and sometimes it's a bit more difficult. It's an interesting time for me personally because I feel like I'm doing the best work I've ever done, but the world has never been more chaotic. So the dichotomy of those two feelings is interestingly enough creating a third feeling that is informing more work. Um, so it just seems like the answer is always to transmute those emotions into more work. So I've like created like a self-fulfilling prophecy I can't get out of, but I'm also not complaining about it because I don't know what else I would do. So to answer your question, everything is great.
No, it's interesting because yes, the world is getting more chaotic, and oddly enough, that is fuel for more creativity. Do you think that there is a connection? Like some people say creativity is like something in the ether and it just all drops down in our head at once. And
hmm
it's just about having the courage or the clarity of actually putting it, making it into something.
I totally agree with that. I'm of the belief that everyone has the same opportunity to produce the same amount of output creatively, even if they're not consciously aware of it. My personal belief is that there is a source, an almighty source of creativity somewhere that penetrates every eon of the universe, and it happens to just get down to Earth, and Earth is one of the small places or a small number of places in which that energy gets to. So when that energy gets to us on Earth, and I think this is what makes a distinction between a good artist and maybe an amateur artist is, it's a Friday night, and I'm going to make it really difficult hypothetical situation for this person, but it's a Friday night and you're super relaxed and you've got a bag of Cheetos in front of you and all you want to do is relax. And then you get an idea and you're like, this isn't the most convenient thing because I have this bag of Cheetos here and I just sat down and binge Netflix and I've had a hard week. What am I going to do about this thing? And really, to me, the proper way to train yourself as an artist is to adhere to your imagination at all times. So you have to ditch the bag of Cheetos and get down to the idea. And that just may take 30 seconds to do. But if you don't take that 30 seconds, it's going to go to someone else. And from my friend group of artists, the most prolific and the artists that I look up to the most are like so militant in that regard that it almost makes hard just to have artist friends in itself, because if an artist is doing their best work, they're usually maybe not always alone, but they're just focused. And to answer your question, I feel like everyone has that opportunity, but most people, and myself included, I mean, I'm not a perfect person by any means. It's the focus that messes you up because
Yeah.
you have the ability to do as much as you want, but it's most, and I don't blame people either because it's so hard to focus these days and at times. So if you can focus, I feel like as an artist or as a creative person, the world is your oyster, but it's also serendipitously never been harder to focus. Um,
Yeah.
you know
I
what
mean,
I mean?
I know what you mean. I think I know myself and a fellow artist, we struggle not with focus, but with, well, everybody struggles with focus. Why lie about that? I think my biggest inspiration comes when I'm asleep.
Mm, in the
I
dream world.
like in the dream world. And I
Mm,
think that's where like I will stop in the middle of crossing the street if I get a ether drop, you know, but
mm,
an e drop. But
yeah, yeah.
if I'm sleeping, that's really hard. And I'm trying to like just say, get up, write that idea down or record that song, because you always make the promise that, oh no, when
Mm.
I wake up, I'll know, I'll remember the lyrics, and it never happens. So that's my biggest e drop when I'm about to sleep or I'm sleeping, and suddenly like this level of clarity comes.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And it might have to do something in itself with you just about to be dropping into the dream world. And then, because ideas are like dreams, they come to you in dreams. So maybe your ideas happen just want to hatch at that time. That's very interesting to hear. I'm usually the opposite. I'm usually, when I wake up in the morning, I feel, and my partner's like, "What is wrong with you?" Because it could be like 7 in the morning, and I just have so much energy. Um, and luckily, I have an outlet to put it into things, into writing, to songwriting, and I have other hobbies too. You know, I think it's really important to juggle um, those avenues of creativity with other things that have nothing to do with creativity in itself, like running or something like that.
Yeah.
Because you have to put the energy somewhere. You know what I mean? That's why criminals are amazing criminals. They have no other place in their mind to put the energy other than being a professional criminal. That energy, kind of like what you're saying, that creative energy, it's all the same. It just gets transmuted into different avenues through different people because everyone's body chemistries are so different yet so similar. And you have to make a choice at a certain point in your life. Where am I going to put all this energy? Um, and it's hard to decide. You know, it's hard to decide. But luckily for me, I've had this outlet for my whole life, and I probably would be like an amazing professional criminal had I not found a more. I'm being facetious when I say that, but I do count my lucky stars because all my energy seems to go into music.
Mm. I mean, but you don't find that if you don't have other, do you find that if all your energy goes to music, it kind of kills the music a little bit? Because I do think that sometimes I need more hobbies,
I
fun
agree.
hobbies.
I agree. That's why I took up running in the last 5 years because it's the most easy thing to just do. You just go, like you just start running, and you just, you know, when you stop, you stop. But that in itself is a good creative primer because you go on a run and you get all those endorphins going, and then you're thinking of things that maybe have nothing to do with music, and then all of a sudden the run is done, and you remember who you actually are whilst being reminded what you're capable of doing. Because you know, I feel like it's for an artist. Artists don't want to do things that don't fall in line with like the cool agenda. Do you know what I mean? Like
I
if it's not seen as cool, or if it's like a page from like another book that may be like somewhat antithetical to like the artist's Bible, then artists won't go near it. But the truth of the matter is you can take all these things in which may be like, you know, seemingly what's the word? Like diametrically opposed, and you can go like, well, actually I'm gonna take that information and totally augment it to my favor and in the guise of being an artist. And that's kind of one of the beautiful things of attempting or just practicing being an artist, is that you have that liberty to take information, figuratively speaking, kind of like this energy that we're talking about that can come from wherever and permeate our minds. And you can twist it and augment it into whatever way you wish it to be augmented, and call it yours. But like I was saying before with the bag of Cheetos thing, that's a decision. Like you have to make that decision to augment it. And it's not easy to do, and it's also it's not necessarily favorable socially at times. I remember being in like my early 20s and being at a bar with all my friends, and the same thing happened. Like I got an idea for a song, and it was one of those things like, are we going to stay out and, you know, party, or are am I going to go home because I just got this idea, and should I practice being a proper artist? And I was the nerd who would go, sorry guys, I'm going home, because I wanted to practice. I wanted to prime my mind as an athlete would, or a runner or a hockey player, whatever, that, you know, you show up to the ice every day and you train. And I think it's no different than being an artist. It doesn't mean it's gonna always be fun though.
Yeah,
You
I
know.
kind of love the power. Coquito, my dog is like going off. Coquito, come. I kind of love the power of though, like voice memos now and text messaging your ideas, because like I think that one of the biggest things I need as a creative is rest.
Mm.
because
Totally.
I can make a song in like 5 minutes, and like I could do it really, really fast. But those are like inspiration searches. So I kind of
Hmm.
like when I get an idea and I have to wait to get it home a little bit, because it like
Hmm.
marinates, and it's exciting to see what you thought of and then rethink about it and think about something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that I do appreciate. But I will say, I think that artists, there definitely exists the artist that is obsessed with being cool and looking cool. And I don't think they're necessarily wrong in needing a depend. I think you need to be aware of cool and trending, depending on where you want to go as an artist. If you want to be like the next Harry Styles or something. But
Right.
I think that they are a circle. There's so many artists, and I think that a lot of them, their maybe their biggest flaw is being too attached to the concept of of themselves. Because you could go the opposite. You might want to be the anti-cool. You
Hmm.
don't do anything trending. You don't want to do any socials. You just want to jam. And that is valid too. And I think that nowadays there's just so many artists and there's so many places to land, that if anything, the real issue is knowing where you want to land, but also knowing that who you will be to get there is not exactly your vision.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. There's some things you just have to leave up to chance. And it's also, I remember thinking as a kid when the thing was VHSs and whatnot, like you would go to Blockbuster and get a VHS. I remember thinking, like, wow, it'd be so cool if me and my friends could film a video and then put it onto VHS and then put it into the player, and then it would create like a cable television channel that like everyone in theory that had cable could watch it. I remember thinking like that'd be super cool because then you could just connect with everyone and you wouldn't need um like a film studio. You would just have your camera, your camcorder, and you would just make a VHS and put it in there. How cool would that be? Well, that's the internet,
Yeah.
right? Like that literally has happened. So it's like everyone's been given such a beautiful power, but because it's like a tsunami that you can't even see the top of it. So you just end up seeing it's just like a wall, and it's been coming at society. I feel like I'm born in 1992, so like I feel like there's like a lot of talk about like Gen like the generation before me, Gen Z, right? Um,
Gen
being
Z?
like Gen Z, being
Gen Z.
like
I was like,
yeah.
what? That's so peaceful.
But in my opinion, our generation is like the true aliens of the internet. Because when I remember being in grade 4, walking back from school with my friend David, and saying goodbye to David, and David was like, "You don't have to say goodbye to me. Actually, you can download this thing called MSN Messenger, and you can talk to me there." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" So in grade 4, I had access to the internet. Controversial potentially, and maybe I shouldn't have, but I did. And I downloaded MSN Messenger, and then and I talked to David about 20 minutes later, and I remember crying. I was like, I don't know why, but I just cried because it was like happy tears. I was like, wow. But I remember thinking like this will never be the same again. The way
Yeah.
the way I communicate with my friends, and that world has just been manifesting and manifesting and manifesting till and will continue to manifest. So to back to that analogy with the tsunami, it's like event at a certain point you could see it coming, and you could be like, wow, that's potentially a daunting thing socially coming for us. And humans are always naturally in denial because we hate change. And so this wave has just got bigger and bigger and bigger, but we asked for it. We created the storm. So now that we've gotten everything, and artists essentially have every liberty that they could have ever wanted in the whole history of being an artist, you have every tool available to you. There's a lot of complaining, a lot of people saying like, well, this is actually not what we wanted. Well, it's like if you didn't want that and you were complaining in the beginning, then what is it going to be? So
Mm.
even with myself psychologically, I'm trying to remind myself like, dude, like you've got Pandora's box. And what messes artists up, I feel like, is they at least for me, you look at the trajectory of someone like a band like Nirvana or something, and you go like, oh, I guess like that's the way it should be. Like you should just be a phenomenon in your second record, and if you don't, then it doesn't mean anything. Which is just simply not the case with the usage of the internet. You can create a trajectory and an infrastructure for yourself that has nothing to do with those systems, but those systems are yet supposedly still so influential,
Yeah.
which I find interesting. But it's ultimately, I think, a great time to be an artist, but it seems like the table of values have been officially rewritten or rewrote, and I think there's a lot of people realizing, because it's like if you think about, well, has this changed? And if you're thinking, has it changed? It's changed. Deep down, it's subconsciously changed. So then you're just dealing with airs of denial, like, well, it's like the whole thing. Well, things will go back to normal. Things never went back to normal. Like, and it's arguably for the best, for the worst. It's hard to say right now. All we know that things are changing. And you would think in a time like this, artists would be valued for their ability to communicate messages that may be very important. But it's probably never been harder to be an artist, which is the total irony of it all. But again, as a working artist, I try not to tell myself that. I try and look at the positives. It's my natural disposition to think positively, regardless of what's going on. You said something that made me go on this tangent, but
No, I mean, I feel like it's the easiest time to be an artist, but it's the hardest time to be to make it. And I think that's what people are really complaining about, money and fame and how it's like the door got open to everyone, and it can be really random who makes it, who can make it. But there still is this old guard and these old ways of things, like the concept of making it, like the idea that if I was watching this TikTok about like how it's like 0.01% chance of you actually becoming a prima ballerina. Yet like millions upon millions are like signing up every day to become a ballerina and dedicate their life to that chance that's 0.01%. And my friend was like, well, I guess you need to think you're the exception, or you need to work like you're going to be the best in order to land somewhere good. And I think that it's something like that. But the frustrating part is that the wealth and the fame can feel so concentrated that yes, you might have the best work of your life, but you might also only get 6 listeners. And
potentially, yeah.
And I think that's really frustrating and rightfully so, and naturally frustrating for artists. But I don't know, I don't know if that's necessarily different, because if you look back at the history of music and money and fame in the industry, I mean, there's always just like 10 people. Like you look at like the 70s greatest hits, and there's like at least 30 artists, right? On the greatest hits playlist. And you're like, damn, 10 years and only 30 artists. Like it's always a small group that we're all trying to enter. And it can feel now more than ever that the group is smaller and even closed off compared to how many people are allowed and able to be an artist nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, the tricky thing with that is it's the comparison game, right? And as an artist, sometimes some of your greatest skill sets are your emotions, and sometimes they're your worst enemies. Sometimes you should just render, in my opinion, like if you're going to get into the comparison game, be like, well, I'm doing this, but this artist is doing that. It's like that starts an endless cycle. And if you can keep that up, because I've talked to friends about it, and peers, and they get into these cycles, and once you get in that cycle, it's super hard to stop. And it's just no help to doing anything. And in a lot of ways, using indifference as an artist is actually like your most like your sharpest spear, so to speak. Because if you're just indifferent to the noise, you can focus on your own noise. You know what I mean? But it's never been harder to do that because, like I said, we've gotten Pandora's box to have everything available to us, and everything being, okay, I want to see what this person is doing compared to me in this exact way. But what good is that going to do you? So that's what I'm saying. In this box we've been given, there's so many advantages, but it's in human nature to look at the disadvantages always. And disadvantages can be advantages. Like there's that, the whole concept of in that book by Malcolm Gladwell, and the famous story about David and Goliath. It's like, Goliath had advantages, and David had disadvantages, but the disadvantages that David had were actually his ultimate advantage. And Goliath's ultimate advantages were his ultimate downfall, because he was too cocky and he was wearing these golden shackles that would protect him, but he couldn't move fast enough for David, and David was way too agile. But right now it seems like we have a world of Davids who aren't focusing on their slingshot skills. They're just focusing on, well, David is way too big. How am I ever going to be like that? But you can be the opposite of that. You can be the antithesis of that.
Yeah.
But it's hard to focus on those positives when it's like, as humans, we want to sleep, we want to eat, and we want to feel happy. They're just like very, very basic things. But there's also parts of our psyche that are more dark, and they want to, for some reason, take us away from that light. And it's the Pandora's boxing. It's like, oh, you want to go into the dark? Oh, the box will show you the dark. All you have to do is just use your fingers, and boom, you're there. So what do you do with that as an artist? You have to be very disciplined in the same way that you have to be disciplined when an idea comes to you. You have to have parameters. I'm not going to compare myself. I'm not going to think, oh, well, this person sounds like that, I should sound like that. It's like, there's a difference between having peers who encourage you and just having, phantom peers, so to speak, who don't even know that you're watching them. And, everyone's become a voyeur in that regard. They're all just comparing themselves to each other. And that just doesn't do anyone good. It doesn't make good art.
I agree with you. I think that slingshot analogy is really apropos. And I think that it's also a fault of human nature and maybe we're just getting more faulty as humans, but we do compare. And it's kind of like we live in this world that is meant to make certain people and certain things feel so big that you can't concentrate on how, if it's little, the little you have can become big, can make
Mm-hmm.
great. And I totally agree with you. I think that's definitely happens amongst artists because especially because of social media. I mean, everybody's doing great, everybody's doing wonderful, everybody has networks and access, but do they? And then how far does that go? Because I've told my friend, I think the music industry is one of the easiest industries to enter and the hardest ones to rise.
Oh, for
Because
sure.
because
Mm-hmm.
of that, kind of like you said, nobody's looking at their slingshot. And also everybody's trying to make their slingshot look like the golden chain,
Mm-hmm.
like it's that Goliath's armor.
Mm-hmm.
So
I yeah, it's really, a friend have told me this piece of advice, and no one really, not that no one cares, but no one is going to give you an extra pat on the back for just keeping going. You know, if you want to keep going as an artist, you should keep going. You should do whatever means necessary, and whatever's unnecessary, just forget about that and just focus on what's necessary. But as soon as you stop, as soon as you quit, that's when people get romantic all of a sudden, or that's when they remember, like, oh, you're quitting. And like that'll be the thing they remember. But no one remembers the person who persisted. You look at someone like Willie Nelson, and you compare the trajectory of Willie Nelson to someone like Kurt Cobain. I don't even think I knew who Willie Nelson was when I was like 17, getting into like grunge music and all that stuff. But Willie Nelson is just turned 90 years old, and he's released like 77 albums, right? And he didn't get big till his ninth album, Shotgun Willie, when he was like 42 years old. no one's why do I not why don't we talk about that story? Why is it more romantic to talk about Kurt and Courtney and then psychologically mess up all these I'm going to say at this point a generation of artists who are looking up to these people, you know, and they're going like, well, I guess that's the way. That's not the way. That's not the way. That's a crazy way to be. And I say this as a fan of that music. Um, I would much rather be, and I'll just be presumptuous in saying I will have a trajectory like that because I just feel like I have so much music in me. But it took me a while to come across artists like that because those stories are ultimately healthy stories, and health, and I don't want to say health and wellness, but like a strong spirited, happy ending to a story doesn't really sell. Tragedy sells, martyrdom sells.
Yeah.
So why did it take me so long to just come across someone like Willie, even though he's in the pantheon publicly? The story of someone like Kurt or Sid Vicious or, you know, anyone who died young, Jimi Hendrix, it's like those stories are still talked about. Like, why aren't we celebrating people who are alive? Do you know what I mean? And we obviously do celebrate Willie. Like he just had that big concert, and but even the music aside, you just study his trajectory as an artist, and that to me that is an internet model well before the internet was even a thing. It's actually amazing he did what he did pre-digital, because in just that physical world, it's kind of unheard of to persist in kind of the industry in which you were explaining, very gate kept, very corporate. It's still a corporate industry, but if it, you know, I often tell my friends like, man, you should look at how much work someone like Willie did, because he could have gave up any at any time, but the fact that he didn't is a miracle. But it also just shows that he loved doing what he did. So it's like if you love doing what you do, just figure out a way to do it. It's simple, but we have we have we have too much to compare ourselves to and too much information that we don't think about those things or that thing that we should focus on. It's like, well, they have more streams than me. It's like, who cares? Like,
It could
because
all change.
what's that?
It could all change. Like
It
there's
could
no
all change. Yeah.
security.
It's exactly like today, you know, today's a new day. What was done tomorrow, you know, you started zero every day. And I just love the stories of triumph and persistence. But when you're younger and more impressionable as an artist, you tend to look at those more romantic Hollywood type stories and go like, well, maybe I should do something like that. But you don't know anything when you're like 17 to 20. I still feel like I'm learning every day. um, so I thank someone like Willie for persisting because it's such a beautiful story.
I think that I totally agree with you. I think that I like those stories. Like I like Tina Turner's story. I saw her documentary, and you know, she had her biggest hits, like her biggest moment of her career and her happiest moment of the career in her 50s. So
Mm,
it's really intriguing to, I think healthy stories matter, and they do fill people up, like the stories of persistence. But I think we're also depressed and we're attracted to death, particularly the death of youth, because I think, you know, some people say it's that you end up writing their story, you end up finishing it. But I also think it's like a literal manifestation of a little manifestation of how we feel. Like some of us, a lot of people feel cut off from in their youth, you know, like they didn't get to go
mm,
like somehow it all got died. And these people, they had it all, and then it got ended on them, it got taken from them. And there's something about that story that even though we don't die, and even though we don't exactly live up to their greatness on this earth, their greatness in quotes, um there's something oddly relatable about that, like just being cut off at the potential of what you could have been.
mm,
And sometimes I
mm,
wonder if that's the attraction beyond, because people say, oh, we're attracted to death and we're attracted to youth and we're attracted to youth dying. But I don't think it's an attraction. I think there's just something oddly deeper and simple about it, which is, you know, we all feel cut off. in some ways.
Mm,
They literally get cut off. And
mm,
it becomes this physical manifestation of what everybody in the ether is spiritually feeling.
mm. I like that. I think, yeah. Um, there is something about like the old type of media that I still think has created a psychological effect on modern artists, that if they don't arise to a certain point at a certain point in their lives, it's over. But once you just rid yourself of that psychologically and just realize that's completely useless in today's world, then you're good. And you just keep on going, and you just figure it out. And that's, I think, the beautiful thing about work in this day and age is that you get to derive of your own table of values. You get to write them. Like I may not be the author of this world, but I get to choose the character in which I am in this world, and that changes the whole story. You know what I mean?
Main
Uh,
character energy. This
sure, yeah, as the kids say,
this
as
is
the
the
kids say.
infamous dog that is like barking away. But it's true. I love when people say main character energy, because I do think if to go along with that idea of everybody comparing, I think just that energy and that title is kind of reminding you are the main character of your life. And I think so often we can feel like a co-protagonist, like someone else is writing it, someone else is starring in it, someone else
Mhm,
is someone else's story. I may be the main character in my story, but someone else's story is just so important and so valued. Who cares? I'm not even going to get.
mhm,
And I think that is just a super valuable message. And when people say it like main character energy, I'm like, yeah, it's like a trigger word. Like, yeah, we need to do,
mhm.
we need a main character our way through this.
It's true. What I just kind of came to mind though is like if everyone in the world is a main character, that is somewhat problematic. So it's almost like like the advantage of living in this world is that you can be that main character. But if everyone's just running around like Superman, like you need other people, you need other counterparts in Superman's story for the function of Superman to actually work,
Mm,
which is kind of the somewhat, I don't want to say tragic, but it's kind of like the cruel irony is that if you just have a bunch of Supermans or Superwomans running around, whoever you are, it can render the character itself useless just because there's so much of the same thing. I guess what I'm saying is you need to have a team of similar minded but also different skills, kind of all at the same time, which is kind of like a band. You know what I mean? Like you don't want to have five lead singers. Um, you can, but it's like,
so
yeah.
have you not heard of the legendary Il Divo?
Yeah, yeah,
With
exactly.
I agree with you. I think that the quote stands, like you should always feel like the main character of your life, but you should also, I think, like connecting your thought, I think it's also you have to grow as a character, and you have to realize
Totally.
that you are super, you may not be Superman, but you might be Lois Lane. And who knows, you might even be Lex if that's what you're into. Um, but you're gonna be a character that is important, at the very least
Mhm,
important to you, most
mhm,
important to you. And I think that that's what that quote says, but that is a valid danger where it's kind of like, again, we're still living in that comparative world, and just check yourself. You can't fly. Okay. You might be
mhm,
Martha Kent. You might be the one to raise Superman. And that is still a great character. But I've kept you for like nearly 40 minutes. So this
no
was
worries.
a really great interview. I loved
Thank
everything
you.
you talked about, and you were super motivational. And you gave me a lot of food for thought. I'm very grateful.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, I love having conversations like this. So thank you so much. Seriously, thank you.
Thank you, and have a great day.
Okay, see ya
See you.
later.